G'day friends, well we're back in the garage. If you saw my last video, you know that we've decided power steering is not the way to go, but the power steering rack is the way to go. So in this episode, we are going to delete our power steering rack properly. Let's go. So it's a lovely chilly day in the garage. I'm here with Dad, who's all safetied up, and what are we working on today? A BMW, replacing all sorts of stuff in here. Camshafts and seals and all sorts of things on the old girl. The Honda is looking absolutely sweet. We're just waiting for a couple more parts, but that is come up amazing. Look at that. Dad started up the other day and it sounds brilliant. So I'm looking forward to having that finished. We'll do some proper photos and I'll post them up too. Cool, so firstly I'd like to apologise for my eye. I got something in it while I was mountain biking with a mate the other day and now it's manky as hell. So yes, sorry for looking like Quasimodo. You're just going to have to deal with it. With the car today, we are going to be removing our power steering and doing it properly. So we're actually going to take the rack out. We're going to get rid of all the oil. We're going to remove the seal and make it into basically a manual rack. So to start off, we're going to Mighty Car Mods it and jack our car up and take the rack out, and we can start removing all the power steering components like a power steering pump and our reservoir and all that stuff. And that gets rid of a bit of weight in the front of the car too. And then when we do our ballast, we can move that weight to the back and balance her up a bit. Good times. Let's get this car jacked up and started. All right, car's up. So this is a little trickier than other cars I've worked on. Unlike my beautiful Sora, where the steering rack is just hanging on the bottom, our steering rack is above the sway bar, the exhaust, and all those fun things. Luckily, there is a big ass gap here, so I'm hoping we can disconnect it all, shuffle it that way, and pull it out through this big hole here. But only time will tell, huh? So what we'll do is we need to disconnect our tie rod ends. Now, what I'm going to do to try and, like I do my own alignment anyway, but try and make life easier, I'm just going to crack these nuts. These are the lock nuts, and then just tape them up. So that'll sort of signify where the position is, and then we can just wind these out of the tie rod ends, and that'll drop down. Once they're disconnected, we'll disconnect the, I wonder if I can point in here. Oh, here we go. I'll disconnect the main oil lines here. So these are the lines that come from the power steering pump. So we'll disconnect them. We're going to drop oil everywhere. So we'll put a can down there and let all the oil drain out. And then pretty much it's just there's two big clamps there that clamps the rack in. Disconnect those. And with any luck, we can get our power steering rack to come out. Oh, and also where it connects to the steering, of course. We might have to look inside the cabin for that. I'm not too sure how it works on this car, but we will find out. Let's go on this adventure together. All right, so we don't make a huge mess down the bottom. I'm going to try and drain some of this fluid out first into our little pot here. So we'll pop this off the pump, try and drain some of it in there so we don't make so much of a mess under the car. Okay, this is going to get progressively harder to film, but we're going to pop off this line here and then drain it into the pot. I'm just going to point the camera at the pot and you can just take my word for it that I took it off. You'll know when it happens. Okay, we've got that disconnected. Now we just need to disconnect that top one, which looks to me to be like a 14mm maybe. So we'll get a spanner on that, disconnect that, and that'll drip a bunch of oil too. It's all coming out. Alright, so we've got those pipes disconnected, and so we don't make any more mess and have all this stuff dripping on us while we're working down below. I'm going to take out the rest of the power steering junk up on top. So what we're going to do is unbolt, the reservoir, the clamps for these pipes, the actual power steering unit itself, which we need to take the alternator belt off to get to the power steering belt, which is a bit of a pain in the butt, but it's not hard. We just undo the tension on the alternator, and yeah, we can get it all done. I'll probably time lapse this because it's all not that exciting. Let's go. Okay, please excuse the compressor noise. Dad's got his sandblast happening over there. But everything's out of the engine bay. So all our lines, our power steering pump, and our power steering cooler that went to the front bar. It was a bit of a wiggle. I just undid these screws, managed to wiggle it through and pull it out the top. But yeah, look how much room's in here now. It's ridiculous. I already thought this engine bay was empty by comparison, but now there's nothing. The worst part is we can see all the gross bits that the power steering stuff's been hiding, so I'm gonna have to give that a good cleanup at some point. What I'll do though is I'll weigh all this junk and find out how much weight we've lost out of the engine bay. Obviously the car has to be like a minimum weight, but if we can move that weight back in the car, that's even better. So we'll give that away and find out, just out of curiosity. Now we need to undo this rack and try and get the rack out. There's our steering rack there. How cool is this lamp? I got these for $2 for Super Cheap Auto, and they're bloody magnetic and just stick anywhere. Freaking awesome. Anyway, all we got to do is just undo that, what looks to be like a 12mm bolt. Undo that, and then we can just pull the steering rack off. Pull the, Jesus Christ, Matt, use your words. Shaft, whatever the hell it's called. Pull that off. We can flip that up, and then that's the rack right there, and that should just fall down when we undo the bolts. So we'll undo that one now. Just got to get these main clamp bolts undone. It's going to be a fiddle. Once I've got them cracked with the 1/2 inch drive, I'll get a socket on there. That feels pretty cracked already, so we'll go to the other side, get it undone. Hopefully we can drop this puppy out. Okay, the bolt's holding our rack unit off, and the rack's now loose. So I'm just going to get my dad to go around the other side and just give me a help, and hopefully we can push the rack that way and then bring it back out this big ass hole I'm filming through. Fingers crossed. Perfect. Oh, yuck. For all you nerds that love the weight saving stuff, this is everything we now don't need for deleting our power steering. So we've got the big ass heavy pump, the big bracket that holds it on, all the pipes, the bolts, the reservoir, all that stuff. So yeah, we'll try and give it away and find out how much that weighs for you. And here's our rack. So this is what we need to modify to become a manual rack. Now, a lot of the XL guys, probably all of them to be honest, run just a loop pipe. So these pipes here, they usually go up to the pump, so they just run a loop here, and then you can just run it as a manual rack. And you know what? Probably works fine. If you haven't figured out from watching this, I like to go overboard and I like to do things properly. So I'm going to go a bit further with this and strip it apart and actually turn it into a manual rack. Yes, let's go on this adventure together. Should be fun. Okay, so I did a brief explanation of how power steering works in my last video, but I'll just have a quick recap. Once again, very simple. So we have splined rack in here. You can see the teeth there, and in here we have a cog. Cog, that's our steering input there. So our steering hooks up to that, drives the cog and moves this shaft left or right, which then in turn turns these in and out, which turns our wheels. Very simple. With the power steering, we've got our feed for high pressure from the pump going in, and then a return line, and then these pipes go to our plunger. So as we turn, the valve either pushes fluid through one of these pipes depending on which way we're turning. So if we're turning one way, it'll push the fluid through here. And inside here we have, on this rack, we have a seal. So it's an O-ring, kind of like a syringe. And as the fluid pushes here, it pushes that, which then pushes that, and then turns the steering. Obviously the other way, you turn, goes to the other pipe then pushes the plunger that way. Very simple. So what I'm doing is we don't need any of these pipes anymore. So I'm gonna take off these pipes, undo this housing here, and then undo. There is underneath here is a tensioner, so it's got like a shim. Actually, it might be on this one. It might be that one. We'll have to have a look. But there should be a shim that kind of puts pressure on the rack and keeps it all from being sloppy. So we've got to undo all that, and then we can hopefully get it apart. We've got to do there's some clips in here, undo that, and then we can get to our seal, because we want to take that whole plunger out, give it all our oil, pack it all up, and make it a manual rack. So let's keep on going. We might do a bit of time lapse on this one. Basically, I'm just undoing bolts at the moment, so nothing exciting. The internal tie rod ends, basically just knock back the lock washer and unthread all them, all good. Then we've taken off, that's the lock nut. And what do we call this thing, Dad? It's the tensioner.
Yeah, it's the tensioner.
It's the tensioner for the rack, so we've taken that off. And now this is a big socket head, but we're going to use a bolt and try and get this undone and get the tensioner out. So only a tiny snag, but this has been, come on. You can see here it's been punched there just to stop that undoing. So we're just gonna have to Dremel out that little bit so we can undo this nut. There we go. There's our gear.
Yeah, it's the pinion.
It's a pinion gear. So as you turn your steering, that sucker goes on the rack. So put him aside for now. Jesus Christ.
All into it. Oh yeah, hey, good job.
So we've now got our rack out, and this is the sucker that we want to remove. So the oil goes in there, that seal's usually there, and that pushes the oil against that or against that. We don't need this anymore, so we're going to get rid of this. So there we go, our plunger's off, our seal, whatever you want to call it. Now we're just going to clean everything. There's one thing I hate is putting stuff together dirty. It makes no sense. So Dad's got a little pot here of petrol, and we'll just give everything a good clean up, ready to be put back together with some grease. We're going to have ourselves a manual steering rack. Okie dokie, everything is all clean and ready to be greased up and put in. Here's all our parts, all here. Here's the bit we cut off, so that's our old seal plunger thingamabob that we don't need anymore. So now it's time to put some grease on this puppy and put it back together. Okay, so this bolt here, this is our tensioner pad that goes in. Remember I showed you that? And we've got our workshop manual here that tells us our torque settings and the rack pad adjustment. Tighten to 20 to 25 Newton meters and loosen 10 degrees. Gotta love that sort of stuff. So we've got our torque wrench and we'll set that up and do it. Sweet, so that's all done up now. So we've got that all done up and we've got our adjusting shim in there. So we didn't, obviously you don't have a socket big enough, so we used just a bolt with a couple of nuts on the end. Pop that in there and then used our torque wrench to torque it up to spec and then did up our outer ring there. While I've been doing this, Dad's been making these. So basically cut, because these are a really fine thread because it's oil and everything. Cut the pipe off of the old pipes and then just tapped it and put a bolt in the end, so that'll stop, because there's no pressure or anything in there now, it's just to stop dust. And so he's just doing that for these ones too, which is awesome. Thanks, Dad. While we've got it here, this is actually really cool. We were both quite surprised by this, but if you can see in there is a little ring clip thing. So what are they called, circlips?
Oh, it's like, yeah, it's a circuit, but an internal circuit.
Yeah, it's an internal circlip. It's a really cool thing. So with the top section here, you see those holes, we used a grinderette spanner, you know, for undoing the goovers, undoing your discs. I can't use my words today. I'm going to try and hold the camera and hold this, and then that fits in there. And when you undo it, it actually winds that circlip out. So it just comes out of that little slot and unwinds, and then that top cap comes out, and then to put it back in, there's just a little hole. You just put the end of the clip in and just wind it back in, and it all locks it up together. It's actually a very clever little system. Go Hyundai, or whatever company you stole it from. Amazing. Now we'll just put the last few bits back together. So we're going to put our tie rod ends back on. I'm just going to give them a bit of a wash and petrol and clean up so they're not grotty. And then yeah, that's pretty much it, and we can put this sucker back in. We have a manual rack. Yeah, Dad's made up these great little blanking bolts, just doing the last one. It's the bigger, the high pressure one, just trying to find a bolt for that. Now we need to find out where center on our rack is. Okay, now we're going to find the center of the rack. So we're going to wind it all the way one way, mark the tie rod end on the floor, and then wind it all the other way and mark it, and then we just measure that, halve it, and that's our center. Yep. And there we go, so that's our halves. We ran it back. Should be the center of the rack now. I can put this sucker back in. Okay, to put the puppy back in, it's pretty much the reverse of taking it out. So, slot it in, bolt it up, connect it up, but we don't have to do any of the power steering stuff now. So wind the tie rod ends in and that's it. It's very simple. So I'm gonna just put it on time lapse and you can just watch me flop around. So there we go, all done. So yeah, putting it back together is the same as pulling it all apart, pretty much. Fed the rack in, that grab one side, and then you're just gonna make sure your steering wheel's straight, because as soon as you put it up, it locks onto the spline. There's 4 bolts to do the clamps up, and then just do up the, there's a 14mm that clamps your steering up. And on the outside, you just wind your tie rod ends back in, tighten them up, wheels back on, done. So yeah, look, it's a bit of work, but it's not that bad. And now we've got a proper manual steering rack. We're not running with pipes and oil and all sorts of weird stuff. We've done it right. So it only took a while. I think I got here about 11 and it's, what, 5 o'clock? So it's about 6 hours with lunch and faffing and all that sort of stuff. I reckon if you kind of got at it properly, you probably get done in 4 hours. It's not too bad. But yeah, we're all sorted now, so I've got a couple of little things to do before the next event. But it's good. I'm probably dumped a bit of power steering fluid around here that Dad's going to find on his floor. Sorry, Dad. But other than that, it's really good. Pretty stoked.
Oh, space.
So much space. Look at all this space for activities in here. It's brilliant, because we had all this junk, and now it's gone. I might try and find some scales. Have you got any scales? We could measure that.
Yeah, I've got a...
Put it in a bag.
I've got a suitcase. So.
There you go, I'll put it in a bag, we'll put it in the suitcase scales and we'll weigh it. And that doesn't even include the fluid too, there'll be fluid in that. Just a reminder to you guys, I am making names for your windows and numbers for your windscreen. So if you need any of those, hit me up, or any other stickers, give me a yell, you never know, I might be able to help you out. Yeah, let's see if we can find some scales and weigh this stuff. Yeah, so we put everything in the bag and we've got some scales here. Let's see how much all this junk weighs that we got rid of. Almost 4.2 kilos.
Plus 500 for the oil.
Plus probably half a litre of oil, so about 500. So about 4.7 kilos saved in the engine bay. That's not bad. That's not bad. So we can now move that weight back here somewhere and try and balance the car out a bit more. I mean, still this car's hugely front weighted, but I guess it all helps, huh? So there we go. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next video. We're off to Winton next weekend, unless somebody goes and eats another bat and we end up on quarantine again. So hopefully we'll speak to you next weekend. Cheers for watching.